Hello, and welcome to the Narcissism Freedom channel. Whether this is your first time here or you're returning, I'm truly glad you're here. This space exists for your healing, your clarity, and your emotional freedom. Today we're talking about a difficult but important topic: what happens when narcissism hides behind Christianity, and how spiritual language can be used to mask cruelty, control, and emotional abuse. This message is not about attacking faith. True faith is rooted in love, humility, compassion, and respect. This message is about recognizing when faith is being misused as a tool of manipulation. Because when spirituality is weaponized, it can leave deep emotional and spiritual wounds, especially for people who value faith, integrity, and doing the right thing. Let's talk about how narcissists hide their true identity behind Christianity. First, they use scripture as a weapon rather than a guide. Instead of using faith to encourage growth, kindness, or healing, they use verses to shame, silence, and control. You may hear phrases like, "A good spouse submits," "Forgiveness means you can't hold me accountable," or "God hates divorce, so you have to stay." These statements are not about spiritual growth. They are about maintaining power and avoiding responsibility. Healthy faith encourages accountability, humility, and transformation. Spiritual manipulation avoids all three. Second, they present themselves as morally superior. They may appear righteous, devoted, and deeply religious in public, especially in church settings. They volunteer. They speak well. They quote scripture. They are admired. But behind closed doors, their behavior does not reflect the values they publicly promote. This creates deep confusion for survivors. You may think, everyone sees them as godly. Maybe I'm the problem. But character is revealed in private, not public performance. Abuse does not disappear because someone knows scripture. And cruelty does not become holy just because it's wrapped in religious language. Third, they use forgiveness as a tool to escape accountability. Forgiveness becomes a demand, not a choice. You are pressured to let it go, move on, or trust God without any real change, repair, or responsibility on their part. True forgiveness does not mean tolerating ongoing harm. Forgiveness does not cancel consequences. And forgiveness does not require you to remain in unsafe or unhealthy situations. Forgiveness can coexist with boundaries. Healing can coexist with distance. Peace can coexist with separation. Fourth, they twist submission into silence. Submission is presented as obedience to them, rather than mutual respect and partnership. You may be told that questioning them is rebellion, that disagreeing is sinful, or that setting boundaries is selfish. But healthy relationships are not built on fear or control. They are built on mutual respect, honesty, and emotional safety. Submission in a healthy faith context does not mean losing your voice. It does not mean accepting mistreatment. And it does not mean surrendering your autonomy. Fifth, they spiritualize abuse. Instead of addressing harmful behavior, they reframe it as God's will, a test of your faith, or part of your growth. Your pain is minimized. Your suffering is justified. Your reality is dismissed. But abuse is not God's will. Cruelty is not spiritual discipline. And suffering inflicted by another human being is not a divine lesson. Spiritual growth does not require emotional harm. And love never looks like control. Sixth, they isolate you using faith-based guilt. You may be encouraged to cut off people who don't support the relationship, don't share your faith, or don't respect authority. Over time, your world becomes smaller. Your support system weakens. Your dependence increases. Isolation makes manipulation easier. When you no longer have outside perspectives, you become more vulnerable to self-doubt and spiritual confusion. Healthy faith communities encourage connection, support, and accountability, not isolation and secrecy. Seventh, they use prayer and spirituality to avoid responsibility. Instead of apologizing, changing, or repairing harm, they deflect with statements like, "I'll pray about it," "God knows my heart," or "We're all sinners." These phrases become shields against accountability. Spiritual language should support growth, not replace it. Faith should inspire change, not excuse harm. If any of these patterns feel familiar, pause here.
Take a breath.
This is not about condemning yourself. Spiritual manipulation works because it targets your values, your conscience, and your desire to do what's right. It works because you care. It works because you are sincere. That does not make you weak. It makes you vulnerable to exploitation, and that is not your fault. Many survivors of spiritual abuse experience deep confusion, shame, and grief. You may grieve the relationship. You may grieve your sense of safety. You may grieve your faith community. You may even grieve your relationship with God. All of that is valid. And none of it means you have failed spiritually. Healing begins when you separate faith from abuse. When you realize that God is not reflected in cruelty. When you realize that love is not reflected in control. When you realize that truth does not require your silence. And when you realize that your well-being matters just as much as obedience. True faith does not demand that you endure harm. True faith does not ask you to disappear. True faith does not punish you for having boundaries. And true faith does not require you to stay in unsafe environments to prove your devotion. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to rebuild your life, your identity, and your relationship with faith in a way that is safe, compassionate, and empowering. If you're struggling with guilt, remember this. Boundaries are not rebellion. They are protection. Leaving harm is not sin. It is wisdom. Speaking truth is not disrespect. It is integrity. And choosing peace is not selfish. It is survival. You are not abandoning your values by refusing abuse. You are honoring them. Recovery from spiritual manipulation takes time. It takes self-compassion. It takes unlearning distorted beliefs. It takes grieving what was promised but never delivered. And it takes rebuilding trust in yourself, in others, and possibly in God. Start by listening to your inner voice again. Start by trusting your feelings. Start by honoring your emotional and spiritual needs. Start by remembering who you were before you were taught to shrink. You are not broken. You are wounded, and wounds can heal. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to affirm this truth. My faith does not require my suffering. My spirituality does not require my silence. My worth does not depend on endurance. My healing matters. And from this moment forward, you can begin reclaiming your truth, one boundary, one insight, and one empowered decision at a time.